My friends and fellow citizens, my name is Rachel Lane, and I work on the communications and marketing team at the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. William Hansard, the outreach coordinator and public historian at the Theodore Roosevelt Center at Dickinson State University. And tonight, we're going to be talking about camping and food. If you didn't recognize that greeting, it's one that Theodore Roosevelt himself often used in his speeches. We are delighted that you decided to join us this evening at our virtual Taste of History event to learn more about TR and the food he ate while camping, and maybe even sample some of those foods. To get the evening started, I'd love for you to drop in the comments where you're tuning in from. We love seeing what places are represented. So I'm just going to drop a quick comment in the chat for anyone to join. All right, comment coming through. Where are you joining us from? All right, we'll be your historical guides for the next hour with brief breaks in between the stories for demonstrations of how to cook these recipes by the library's executive chef, Candace Stock. If you'd like to follow along, now's the time to grab the ingredients you'll need, and of course, the camping essential, a frying pan, ideally, of course, a cast iron. We'll wait just a minute or two before starting and read out some of the places represented while you're getting ready. We're also going to be dropping in the recipe card if anyone needs it or wants it. Just one moment. Let me copy that. All right, so we see Sydney, Montana is one of the places that's represented. Feel free for anybody else to drop in if you'd like. All right, we had an error dropping in the recipe card, so I will attend to that in a second. But first, let's get started thinking about the times you've spent outdoors and what you ate. So, what are your memories of camping and eating in the great outdoors? Was it a beef stick during a hike, or perhaps some s'mores around a campfire? What have been some of your most memorable meals eaten outside? Have you enjoyed different meals during different times of your life? Perhaps you enjoyed roasted hot dogs over a campfire when you were a kid, but now you can't get enough of a hobo meal, also sometimes known as a foil packet dinner. As we work our way through some of TR's camping trips this evening, we'll see what food he enjoyed in the great outdoors. And we hope by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to find points of connection with TR and the food he ate under the stars. So with that, I'm going to introduce my colleague, William Hansard, and we'll get things started for the evening.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rachel. So a bit of background before we delve into a few stories from TR's time camping. Roosevelt's often called our conservation president due to the millions of acres of land he preserved for future generations while he was the president. This was done through national parks and national monuments, especially national forests and so on. And this conservation ethos stemmed from his love of the outdoors that he developed as a young man, and he believed it was important for all Americans to experience. As he wrote in his book, Outdoor Pastimes of an American Hunter, quote, "Camping out, and therefore the cultivation of the capacity to live in the open, and the education of the faculties which teach observation, resourcefulness, self-reliance, are within the reach of all who really care for the life of the woods, the fields, and the waters," end quote. In addition to communing with nature and making scientific observations, Roosevelt enjoyed camping as a way to spend quality time with his friends and his family. Whether he was reciting ghost stories to his sons and his nephews or regaling hunters with tall tales of his time in the West, a night sitting around the campfire with Roosevelt was sure to be a satisfying one. Good food and good coffee were an integral part of that experience as well. Now, although Roosevelt worked up a ranchman's appetite when he was adventuring in the outdoors, his meals on those excursions were not always hearty. On his first Badlands adventure hunting the bison, he and his guide, Joe Ferris, reduced their stores down to only a few dry biscuits, and they could only drink some mouthfuls of muddy water. We're excited to share these recipes and stories with you, and it was hard to narrow down the three that we selected. One of our personal favorites that we ultimately didn't include is the fried chicken TR cooked at the presidential retreat in Pine Knot, Virginia. He described this in a 1905 letter to his son Kermit. Quote, On Saturday evening, I fried 2 chickens for dinner while Mother boiled the tea, and we had cherries and wild strawberries, as well as biscuits and cornbread. To my pleasure, Mother greatly enjoyed the fried chicken and admitted that what you children said of the way I fried chicken was all true. End quote. Now, what was TR's secret that made that fried chicken so good? Well, in 1905, he told his friend, the journalist Henry Beach Needham, that he fried his chicken in bacon fat. And as you'll learn in this program, that was TR's sort of secret ingredient for making all of his camping meals. And with that, I'm going to toss things back over to Rachel.
Perfect. Thanks so much, William. All right, with all of that in mind, now let's embark on our journey through TR's life outdoors. And the first food we'll look at this evening, TR enjoyed in both the East and the West, sauteed trout. TR's first camping trip was when he was 12 years old, camping with Hilborn West, known as Uncle Hill, his mother's half-sister's husband, his father, Theodore Roosevelt, his brother Elliot, and his cousin James West Roosevelt, also known as West. The location was the Adirondacks of New York. Along with 3 guides, Godfrey, Moses Sawyer, and Jack Hayes, TR and crew spent August 8th, 1871, in the bush, initially starting on the lower St. Regis before portaging through the woods. They had planned to then launch at a small stream, but were inhibited by a thunderstorm. They took shelter under their boats for a little while before they were able to resume their journey. They passed through 2 small rapids and caught 8 trout before pitching their tents for the night by the larger rapids. In his diary, TR provides great detail of the wildlife they saw during their trip, including both the English and Latin names for almost every creature. They saw a number of birds and even the tracks of wolves and bears. And those 8 trout that they caught, they ate for dinner. After supper, read aloud from Last of the Mohicans, a book about frontier expansion set in New York. As TR notes in his diary, "In the middle of the reading, I fell asleep. Father read by the light of the campfire." The next day, TR and some of the others went trout fishing. Although the others were successful, TR was not. But he did manage to lose his fishing pole, which he later recovered, get pulled in by the current, and swept down the river. He managed to get back on his feet when the river calmed down and spent a good portion of the afternoon trying to fish, yet never caught anything. Now, 15 years later, this time in Wyoming territory, so out in the West, TR had more success with trout fishing while hunting in the Bighorn Mountains with William Bill Merrifield and a teamster named Lebo. As TR noted in a September 20th, 1884 letter to his sister Anna Bammy Roosevelt, "Merrifield and I, in our moccasins and buckskin suits, hunted almost every day on foot, following the game into the deepest and most inaccessible ravines. Merrifield and TR were after grizzlies in particular." Roosevelt goes into great detail of the hunt in both Hunting Trips of a Ranchman and in this letter to his sister. Suffice to say, the first grizzly TR killed was the first grizzly he had seen in the wild. He and Merrifield were 25 feet away from the grizzly, and TR killed him with a bullet exactly between his 2 eyes. The bear was nearly 9 feet long and weighed over 1,000 pounds. During this 2-week hunting trip, TR killed 2 additional grizzly bears, 6 elk, and as many deer, grouse, and trout as we needed for the table. Even though trout wasn't the main focus of the trip, it was a grizzly, it provided excellent fare to TR and Merrifield. Now, while we don't have TR's recipe for how he cooked the trout, either during his Adirondacks trip as a 12-year-old or during his trip to Wyoming's Bighorn Mountains as a 25-year-old, we do have a recipe for trout cooked over a campfire from his son, Ted Roosevelt, who may have learned it from his father. Ted's recipe was included in Charles Frederick Smith's Games and Recreational Methods for Clubs, Camps, and Scouts, published in 1924, under the section entitled Hike Cooking. Unlike TR, who thought of himself as what he said, a poor cook, Ted fashioned himself an excellent cook in the woods and noted most of his cooking was done with a frying pan and included bacon somehow, which, as William noted, was one of TR's secret ingredients. As Ted writes, I'm very fond of trout cooked Western style. Clean the trout carefully. Cook in your fry pan enough bacon to give you sufficient fat to prevent the fish from burning. Now dip the fish in pancake batter. Lay a couple of pieces of the partially cooked bacon inside the fish and place it in the pan. Cook him well in a very hot pan, being careful not to let him shrivel, which will happen if he lies too long on one side. While we don't know if TR ever cooked trout Western style, at the very least, we know it has a Roosevelt connection. Now, for those of you who purchased ingredients ahead of time to make the recipe live, now's the time to get out those ingredients. You'll need bacon, trout or some other type of fish, and pancake batter, either store-bought or homemade, and, of course, a frying pan. And while you're doing that, I want to just note that we have another guest that tuned in, noting that they are joining us from Grand Forks, North Dakota. So with that, I'm going to turn over to this video from Chef Candace Stock, our executive chef at the library.
Hi, I'm Chef Candace Stock, and we're going to prepare one of TR's recipes. It's a sauteed trout that's coated in pancake batter and doused with bacon fat, served with bacon fat potatoes. This is the pancake batter, and it's wild rice pancake batter. Bacon. Good.
Okay.
Drop it on like that. On top of it. Bacon. And just top it. Fresh herbs.
Jumping in to add that we have additional guests who are joining us from Sioux Center, Iowa, and also Oyster Bay, New York, which of course is the site of Theodore Roosevelt's home, Sagamore Hill. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to William.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rachel. Boy, I hadn't had my supper yet, and that video of that fish frying made me hungry. I never would have thought to fry fish in pancake batter, but it looked pretty good. As soon as we have the slides ready, then I will start talking about that next story. Fantastic. Here we go. So for our second TR-inspired camp food, we are traveling to the family home of Sagamore Hill in Oyster Bay, Long Island, New York. Theodore Roosevelt was a strong advocate of the strenuous life, and he always relished the opportunity to be outside, especially in the property surrounding Sagamore Hill. Hi, Brian. Nice to see you again. Thanks for popping in. TR camped in some incredible places like Yellowstone and Yosemite, in the Amazon jungle and the African savanna, but his camping out trips near Oyster Bay were near and dear to his heart. It was his opportunity to be a boy again, and he would take his sons and his nephews, who affectionately knew him as Uncle Teddy, out to the camp on the beach near Oyster Bay. TR describes one of these adventures in an August 6, 1903 letter to his sister-in-law, Emily Caro. Quote, I took Kermit and Archie with Philip, Oliver, and Nicholas out for a night's camping in the 2 rowboats last week. They enjoyed themselves heartily, as usual, each sleeping rolled up in his blanket and all getting up at an unearthly hour. Also, as usual, they displayed a touching and firm conviction that my cooking is unequaled. It was of a simple character, consisting of frying beefsteak first and then potatoes in bacon fat over the campfire. But they certainly ate in a way that showed their words were not uttered in a spirit of empty compliment. End quote. These boys ranged in age from 9 to 13 years old. TR's 2 sons, Kermit, 13, and Archie, 9, and his nephews, Oliver Walcott Roosevelt, 12, Philip James Roosevelt, 11, and Nicholas Roosevelt, 10 years old. Now, while Roosevelt's letter to Emily describes the food they ate on this camping out trip, we need to turn to Roosevelt's book, again, to Outdoor Pastimes of an American Hunter, for more details on this trip. In a section where TR describes some of the birds and animals he'd seen at Sagamore Hill, he writes that he had seen but 1 fox near Sagamore Hill. Quote, this was early one morning when I had spent the night camping on the wooded shores near the mouth of Huntington Harbor. The younger children were with me, this being one of the camping out trips in rowboats on the Sound, taken especially for their benefit. We had camped the previous evening in a glade by the edge of a low sea bluff, far away from any house. And while the children were intently watching me as I fried strips of beefsteak and thin slices of potatoes in bacon fat, we heard a fox barking in the woods. End quote. While TR enjoyed potatoes cooked in bacon fat during many of his camping trips, this one stood out in his memory. As he added, quote, hearing the fox gave them a delightfully wild feeling, and with refreshing confidence they discussed the likelihood of seeing it next morning. And to my astonishment, see it we did, on the shore, soon after we started to row home. End quote. 4 years later, TR still remembered this camping trip, writing to his friend Brander Matthews on July 19, 1907, quote, the other night I took out the boys in rowboats for a camping out expedition. We camped on the beach under a low bluff near the grove, where a few years ago on a similar expedition we saw a red fox. This time, 2 young foxes, evidently 3 years cubs, came around the campfire 6 times during the night, coming up within 10 yards of the fire to pick up scraps and seeming to be very little bothered by our presence. End quote. If you'd like to try your hand at making TR's potatoes and bacon fat, you can try the contemporary recipe for camp potatoes from a 1914 publication of the Oregon Agricultural College Extension Service for a camp cookery project for Boys and Girls Club. That recipe is as follows. A favorite way to cook potatoes in a skillet is to peel and cut them in rather thin slices. Cover with water and boil until tender, gradually letting the water boil off. When most of the water has boiled off, add a little bacon fat, 1 or 2 tablespoonfuls, and brown the potatoes somewhat. Great care must be taken to keep them from scorching, and so it is best to have a very small fire. Season them with salt and pepper. Now, if you're making this recipe live with us, now's the time to get out your potatoes, thinly sliced, a little bacon fat, or another comparable substitute like oil, and salt and pepper, and your handy-dandy frying pan, and enjoy watching Chef Candace at work.
I'm just going to pre-slice these.
Okay. A little downtime right before the show. Chef is playing.
Oh, maybe not so soon. Top of it, bacon. And just top it. Fresh herbs.
Just one moment. All right. So yes, we have the slides all up. So I wanted to jump in and note that we have someone who's joining us from Gainesville, Georgia. Welcome. Thanks so much for being here. And I definitely agree with the comment that says, too bad I just had dinner. This looks great. It does look amazing. And we are so fortunate to have Chef Candace on our staff. And as you'll notice, she decided to plate the potatoes with the fish. Who knows if TR decided to do that or not. I'm sure it probably wasn't as fancy, though, when he was camping out. All right, so now we've come to the final food of the evening, and we're headed to Dakota Territory, the place where the romance of TR's life began, the location of the Theodore Roosevelt Center at Dickinson State University, and of course, the location of the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library, which will open July 4th, 2026 in Medora, North Dakota. So this recipe I'm especially excited about because we have TR's own recipe. So I'm super excited to be able to share that. TR mentions frying pan bread regularly in his writings about his time in North Dakota and out west. And he really actually didn't like it that much. So it's kind of funny we have his recipe. But he said that he ate it out of dire necessity, as it was a staple while hunting or during a roundup. As TR describes a moose and elk hunting trip, when we left the wagon for a few days at a time to hunt, we carried blankets. We carried neither blankets nor packs, as the walking was difficult and we had much ground to cover. Each merely put on his jacket with a loaf of frying pan bread and a paper of salt stuffed into the pockets. We were encumbered with nothing save our rifles and cartridges. And then similarly, he wrote in A Book Lover's Holidays in the Open, which is published in 1916, when I lived much in cow camps, I often carried a volume of Swinburne as a kind of antiseptic to alkali dust, tepid, muddy water, frying pan bread, sow belly bacon, and the too infrequent washing of sweat-drenched clothing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to William.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I'm just going to take a moment to shout out Stephen Gilroy. You mentioned his comment as well. Shout out Brian and Jeannie. Great to see familiar names as well as everyone else who's joining us. We really appreciate it. So although there are a lot of stories we could discuss about TR's time in North Dakota or anywhere else in the West that feature this frying pan bread, one of our favorites is the boat thieves adventure. This is sort of in what I call the greatest hits of TR's life, right? These stories that are ones that he enjoys telling over and over. So in March 1886, thieves will steal Theodore Roosevelt's boat at the Elkhorn Ranch and head downriver with it. He had packed up this boat to go on a mountain lion hunting trip. Determined to bring the thieves to justice, TR will build a new boat with his ranch hands, Bill Sewell and Will Dow. And they'll do this over the course of several days. Now, TR thought that this will give him a fighting chance against the thieves because they had stolen the only boat anywhere for miles. Now, as TR records in his book, Ranch Life and the Hunting Trail, quote, "Into the first-class flat-bottom boat, we packed flour, coffee, and bacon enough to last us a fortnight or so, plenty of warm bedding, and the mess kit. And early one cold March slid it into the icy current, took our seats, and shoved off down the river." End quote. TR, Sewell, and Dow will endure extremely cold temperatures down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit and a furious blizzard as they head downriver to chase the thieves. The Little Missouri River is also really unpredictable at this time. It's churning with ice and debris. Nasty time to be on the Little Missouri River in Dakota Territory in the spring of '86. On the third day of going downriver, TR, Sewell, and Dow will finally catch up to these thieves, of whom there are also 3. Because the thieves thought they had the only boat on the river, TR and his ranch hands were able to take them by surprise and capture them. Now, they didn't tie up these captives because they thought it would mean that the thieves could lose their hands and feet to frostbite. So instead, Roosevelt will require them to remove their boots. Now, in my head, they could also lose their feet to frostbite that way. But that was the reasoning anyway. And the likelihood of these thieves trying to escape barefoot in this winter weather, trudging through freezing mud, was pretty low. Now, although no one in the West would have faulted Roosevelt for killing these men on the spot, he insists on bringing them to a justice of the peace. They will travel for 8 additional days, which TR will describe, quote, "as irksome and monotonous as any I ever spent. There is very little amusement in combining the functions of a sheriff with those of an Arctic explorer," end quote. When they reach the Sea Diamond Ranch, TR's supplies were so low that he'll send his ranch hands to continue downriver while he will march the prisoners overland to Dickinson, North Dakota. He will hire a settler to drive a wagon where he decides to put the prisoners while he marches behind them to keep watch. They will march 36 more hours. TR will not get any sleep at all. He will actually be reading Anna Karenina in French to keep himself awake. But finally, they will reach the main street of Dickinson, where Roosevelt will hand these 3 thieves over to the Justice of the Peace, Western Star. Yes, that was his real name. For his efforts, TR will receive fees as a deputy sheriff as well as mileage for the 300 miles he's gone over. And it's a total of some $50. About $1,700 or so in today's money. Now, TR's sense of justice and his action might not seem too unusual to us today, but they were uncommon in the quote-unquote Wild West, which generally preferred more vigilante justice for these types of crimes. And this will demonstrate the type of character that TR had and his belief in the importance, even the sacredness of the law. Now, as you might have guessed, frying pan bread was one of the staples during this wintry escapade. TR will write about one of their camps before they catch up to the thieves, quote, "At midday, we landed on a sandbar for lunch. A simple enough meal, the tea being boiled over a fire of driftwood that also fried the bacon, while the bread only needed to be baked every other day. End quote. Had a typo there, sorry. Although TR doesn't specifically say frying pan bread, another reference to bread and the ingredients used later on in the trip after the thieves are captured suggest it was indeed frying pan bread. Plus, such bread was a staple out west for a lot of people who are out, on these kinds of trips. As TR will note, quote, "Being able to kill nothing, we exhausted all our stock of provisions and got reduced to flour without yeast or baking powder, and unleavened bread made with exceedingly muddy water is not, as a steady thing, attractive." End quote. Now, TR doesn't give his recipe here, nor in his other books, but thanks to an inquisitive 12-year-old boy who wrote to TR after reading his book, The Wilderness Hunter, we know exactly how TR made this bread. As TR responded to this boy's letter, quote, The way I make frying pan bread is to grease the bottom of the pan and then make a thin cake of dough with flour, water, and baking powder. And after it has been warmed enough to have some consistency, tip the pan in front of the coals, turning the cake over when necessary. End quote. Now, for this recipe, we don't have a video for you, but instead we want to direct you to an educational resource available on the Presidential Library's Teach with TR page. Now, by following the steps in our hands-on history activity, you too can make TR's frying pan bread. Muddy water, not recommended. You'll just need flour, baking powder, and good clean water, along, of course, with your frying pan. And I see we've got the link in the chat there for you to be able to go look at that educational activity. And with that, I'm going to toss things back again to Rachel.
Thanks so much, William. So yes, you'll see in the chat, there's a link to the frying pan bread recipe. If for some reason you can't get to that link, you can go to trlibrary.com. And if you go under, I believe it's programs, you'll see educational resources as the tab, and you'll find that down by scrolling on the page, how to make TR's frying pan bread. So we thank you so much for joining us tonight as we ate our way through Theodore Roosevelt's time in the great outdoors. We hope you learned a thing or two about TR, his camping out habits, and some historical recipes as you reflected on your own time outside and what you most enjoy about sleeping or camping under the stars. If you'd like to see more virtual Taste of History events, let us know by dropping a comment or sending us an email with the types of food or drinks you'd like to see highlighted. So we do have some time for a few questions. So I'm going to give anybody a chance to drop some in the comments. So I'll put a quick comment here. And I did want to start off with one in case people have attended our book talk, which occurred 2 weeks ago, our first virtual event for the library's 2025-2026 virtual programming series. So David Gessner wrote Leave It As It Is, which is about TR conservation and the legacy. And he suggests that the most transformative outdoor experience for TR was his time in Europe, whereas a viewer to that event suggested the Adirondacks. So I'm going to punt this to William and ask him, what do you think was the most transformative outdoor experience for TR, perhaps in addition to the Badlands, because of course we're very biased toward North Dakota. So let me pop William on and see what he has to say.
Thank you, Rachel. It's an interesting question, right? Because TR himself will say many times that it is, his time in the Badlands, his time in Dakota Territory that he views as the most transformational, the thing that makes him who he is. Some of that, I think, is sort of rose-colored glasses, looking at that particular time in his life with great nostalgia. There's no doubt that it actually was transformative in many ways, but he does sort of push aside many of these other adventures he has in his life that deeply, change him, that create the man that we know, or if we even look at later times in his life, things that transform him as well. So to talk about his youth, right, certainly the Adirondack Mountains, where he begins, his bird watching adventures really in earnest, and he starts making those scientific observations in the Adirondacks and Long Island. Those are certainly part of it. His time in Europe as a boy is transformative in many ways, right? The things that he sees, the adventures he has, even the time that he spends with his Uncle Jimmy in Liverpool, all kinds of things like that. Part of this question even might be, what parts of his life are we talking about, right? That make him, that transform him, right? So the time in Egypt when he's hunting birds, not long as a teenager, not long after he's gotten his spectacles and his shotgun. But two, if, like I was saying earlier, if we look later in his life, like there's no doubt that the African safari and especially the River of Doubt transform him, and the River of Doubt for the worse, right? He will say that it probably took 10 years off his life to go down the River of Doubt, and he may have been right about that. So sort of the cop-out historian answer is that I'm not sure there is any one clear answer. They all do different things for him in different ways.
That's very fair, and I think you're correct that Amazon was transformative, but not maybe in the sense that we might be thinking transformative. So I popped one question in the chat if anybody wants to jump in. What recipe are you most likely interested in trying? So I'll toss it to William. Obviously, we were presenting and not cooking, but which recipe might you want to cook some other time?
Oh man, that trout in pancake batter looks pretty darn tasty to me. I never, like I said, I would never have thought to fry fish in pancake batter. But I mean, you think about sort of southern fried fish in beer batter and things like that. It's logical. I just never would have thought of that. So I might have to try that at some point. What about you?
Probably the trout, because when I was, doing research for this and discovered Ted Roosevelt's recipe, I was like, do we think TR actually actually ate it? What do you think? Do you think Ted came up with that himself, or do you think it was something that TR introduced to his son?
It was certainly TR inspired, if nothing else, right? Ted definitely picked up that frying everything in bacon from his dad, no doubt about that. TR may or may not have been the one to actually come up with the recipe on the basis that he wasn't much of a fisher, right? He didn't do a whole lot of fishing. I mean, a little more in his youth than in later years, but I don't know how much opportunity he would have even had to come up with recipes for fish simply because he didn't catch that many.
Well, yes, as we noted, even in his youth, he was not successful, whereas
Yeah.
some of the other people on the trip with him were. So we have one person who says definitely the potatoes. I mean, you can't go wrong with some good potatoes and
Yeah.
bacon fat.
Yeah, that browning they got on them, they looked really like crispy on the outside, but still kind of fluffy on the inside. That was tasty looking.
Yes, it does look tasty. It was just mouth-watering watching Chef Candace make it. So very excited for next year. Anybody who comes out to visit the library, you'll get to try some of Chef Candace's wonderful food. So we have someone else who says the potatoes. Somebody else who says the trout and the batter, the pancake battered trout. I noticed nobody is saying muddy water frying pan bread, but we do have one question. So I'll toss this to you, William, and if there's anything you want me to add, I can add too, but I feel like this might be more your purview. Okay, so we know that TR raised cattle out in the Dakota Territory. Did he often eat steak, and do we know how it was prepared?
Yeah, so I mean, we know he ate lots of steak while he was camping, and it came up in a couple of these stories, right? That he pretty frequently is frying beefsteak while he's out on these expeditions. And again, he's frying those steaks in bacon fat. Now, as far as like the temperature, is he going to medium rare or medium or something like that? I've never seen any references to like the doneness of the steak that he likes. But TR is definitely a meat and potatoes kind of guy, right? He likes hearty meals. As far as how often he may or may not have eaten it at home rather than camping, Brian or even Stephen, you guys may know better than I do some of what he had at home there at Sagamore Hill. But definitely when he's out on the range, when he's out camping, when he's out on these different adventures, steak is always going to be a staple of that diet. And even as we noted, out at Pine Knot, Virginia, that cabin, that retreat, he's cooking steaks out there too. I think it's for him a relatively easy thing to just throw in a skillet and cook till it's done. And that may be part of it too, is it's not too difficult to cook. But that's a great question.
All right, so I'm going to jump in and not talk about steak because we know that TR was definitely a meat and potatoes guy. But one of my favorite examples of foods or drinks that TR had out west was he was a huge fan of milk, but he was not a huge fan of buttermilk. And I can't remember who exactly set him up where this one lady made her own homemade buttermilk. A friend of TR's was like, oh, you need to try this. TR tried it, pretended that he thought it was delicious, and then afterwards told his friend, don't ever set me up like that again. I do not like buttermilk, but out of courtesy to the woman who made it, he did not put a sour face on. So that's a fun buttermilk story. So let's see, there's another comment here. Okay, so Gemma says that TR is maligning fry bread. It's actually good. although it tastes better immersion fried than pan fried. Maybe a little bacon fat would fix that. So yes, I agree. Can never go wrong with bacon. So I'll give anybody else a chance to drop any comments before we close, but you'll note on this side that we'll have another Taste of History event next month on Monday, November 17th at 5:30 Mountain. And this Taste of History event will be focused on holiday recipes. So getting you started for the holiday season. So if you'd like to know what TR ate for the holidays and maybe are interested in serving those own recipes during your holiday festivities, come and join us Monday, November 17th at 5:30. And I don't see any other comments, so I will close things out and say, until next time, thank you so much for spending your evening celebrating our 26th president, his first visit. Oh, we do have a question, so hold on, hold that thought. What vegetables were most often available to TR while in Dakota Territory, and what were his favorites? So I will toss that to William.
Yeah, Brian, I actually don't know at all. That's a fantastic question. Now, what I do know is they did have a vegetable garden at the Elkhorn Ranch. Bill Sewell and Will Dow's wives will grow vegetables in the garden there. And I would be shocked if the references to what specifically they were growing was not in either Ranch Life and the Hunting Trail or one of those other books, or at very least in letters. But I've never actually read into what those vegetables would have been. So that's something worth looking into for sure. In addition to those fresh vegetables, they're probably having a fair amount of canned vegetables. They're going to be able to get canned vegetables from the stores there in Medora, or having other things sort of shipped in on the train if they want. I know as a general rule, well, I was going to say, now I can't remember. He either really likes or really doesn't like canned tomatoes, and I just forgot in the moment that I was trying to think of it.
That I can't remember. I know he does not like canned peaches. I know that.
Yeah, that's because he loves peaches. Peaches are, his favorite, just about his favorite fruit in the world, and he doesn't like them canned. But yes. So it would be great to look into what those vegetables were that were being grown there at the Elkhorn Ranch. And they would have been able to buy seeds or have them shipped in for whatever vegetables that was going to grow well enough. Now, you have to remember, Dakota Territory soil is very alkali. And so not everything grows well in it. And of course, it's very dry as well. So it's a lot of work to grow vegetables of any kind. But he was having something. We'll have to look into what that is, Brian. Great research question.
I agree. I do not also know off the top of my head. So that's something that William and I can put our heads together and see if we can come up with an answer and get that to you all. All right. So I'll start my ending again. If anybody wants to jump in with a last minute question, that's fine too. But we are so grateful that you spent your evening with us celebrating our 26th president. His trip to Medora, North Dakota, which took place in September of 1883. TR often visits Dakota Territory in September and October. So the timing of this camping Taste of History is very fitting. And we're just excited that you were able to learn some of the stories behind some historical camping out recipes. And with that, I will close things off.